Once upon a time there was a very good doctor in China. His name was Dr. Li Wenliang, and he was an eye doctor. Every day, Dr. Li went to work at the hospital in a city called Wuhan to treat his patients. He saw patients with all kinds of issues. Some needed glasses so they could see from afar, others needed them to see things up close, and some elderly patients needed small operations so that they could just see better. Dr. Li loved his job and took care of all his patients with joy. One day, however, he noticed something strange. He observed that instead of having many different problems, his patients all seemed to be suffering from the same illness. It appeared to be a terrible cold, like the flu, but was unlike any other flu that Dr. Li had treated in the past. The doctor immediately sent a message to his colleagues to warn them that this strange flu was going around and tell them that, though he didn't know exactly what it was, it appeared to be very contagious because he had already seen 7 patients with it. The following day, police officers went and knocked on the doctor's door. They told him he had to stop sending messages or else they would arrest him and put him in prison. They thought the doctor was getting worked up for no reason and they didn't want him to frighten the other doctors, but as the days went by, more and more people got sick with this strange flu. Now there were very many ill patients. Dr. Li's colleagues quickly realized that he had been right. This flu was caused by a virus that they had never seen before. They began working together. There were those who observed the virus in the laboratory to understand how it spread, others who treated patients, and those who tried to develop a vaccine to protect people. For every patient they treated, and every hour they spent in the laboratory, the researchers, doctors, and nurses learned something new. They discovered that it was a virus that was part of a family called the coronavirus, a type of virus that when you looked at it under a microscope, appeared to have a crown on its head. Corona is another word for crown. The police apologized to Dr. Li, but unfortunately, it was too late. The doctor had fallen ill and died a few days later. The doctors discovered that the virus came from an animal, possibly a bat or a snake, but they couldn't be sure. It wasn't easy to know for certain because the virus couldn't be questioned. Normally viruses found in animals don't make humans sick, but this was a new virus and a lot of research would have to be done to understand its behavior. In the meantime, though, they had to find a way to protect as many people as possible from getting sick. The researchers discovered something very important. Even people who didn't have a cough or fever could hug, touch, or kiss someone and unknowingly transmit the virus to them. They discovered that when a person coughed or sneezed and a few tiny drops of saliva landed on a door handle or an elevator button, someone who then touched that same handle or button even hours later could get infected. With the virus, they also discovered that washing your hands thoroughly with soap made the virus disappear. Finding a vaccine became urgent so that people could stop worrying when they hugged each other or called the elevator. In fact, vaccines protect people from getting sick even when they come in contact with the virus. It's thanks to vaccines that we are no longer afraid of getting measles or chickenpox. But what could be done to prevent people from getting sick while researchers around the world were trying to develop a vaccine? The scientists came to a conclusion. People had to be asked to stay home because this way the virus couldn't spread and there would be fewer people falling ill. Those who did get sick would get the care they needed and the researchers would have time to find a solution. The doctors in Wuhan told their colleagues in other countries about the new virus, but many thought it was a Chinese problem and wouldn't affect them, so they weren't concerned. But in a few days' time, the virus arrived in Italy, France, the United States, Spain, Germany. In the beginning, nobody wanted to believe it. Just like the police officers from Wuhan had done, the other governments around the world also refused to listen to the scientists. It's not a big deal, they said. But sick people kept coming to the hospital, and soon there would be no more beds left to put them in. Shortly after, other countries around the world also started telling people to stay at home and that children were no longer allowed to go to school. How long will this last? The children asked, but the adults didn't know. They did know, however, that even though the schools were closed, the kids had to keep up with their schoolwork and studies. This is because it would take many doctors like Dr. Li, many teachers, many scientists, and many researchers for people to once again hug each other and take the elevator together without having to worry about a thing. Many, many years ago there was a king in a far country. He was famous, he was strong, and he was very clever. But in his country he had many wrongdoers. The king was unhappy about this, but how can you stop people from doing wrong? It is not easy. He thought about this difficult question for a long time, but he could not find the answer. Suddenly, one day, he had a good idea. He spoke to his people and told them to build a big stadium in the center of the city. It must be very big and very beautiful, he told them. So the people worked hard for many months. One day, the building was finished. The stadium was ready. Inside it, there were places for 5,000 people. Everyone was very excited about this beautiful new building. Some wanted to watch games in the stadium. Others wanted to have dancing and singing. But what did the king want? No one knew. The day of the opening came. Everyone ran to the stadium to get a place inside. The people got more excited when the king arrived. They were all quiet, waiting. First, he took his place. Then, he stood up and spoke. "My people, my friends," he said. "Firstly, I want to thank all the workers for their good work. We now have a beautiful stadium and it is very well built. Secondly, I know that many of you want to see games and dancing here. But this stadium is going to be different. It is not going to be a place for having a good time. It is going to be a place for wrongdoers. If one of you does something wrong, we are going to bring him to this place. There he must stand in the middle of this stadium in front of us all. Now, do you all see those two doors, colored blue, at the far end of the stadium? They look the same, perhaps. But they are not. Behind one door, I am going to put a dangerous animal, a tiger. Behind the other door, there is going to be a beautiful lady. The wrongdoer must choose one of these doors. If he opens the wrong door, he finds the tiger. It jumps out and kills him. If he opens the other door, he finds the beautiful young woman. She is to be his wife. They must marry immediately, right here in the stadium before our eyes. After that, they can live happily with us as husband and wife. So each wrongdoer must choose very carefully. Before he chooses, he, and we, cannot know if he is going to live or die. As soon as he opens one of those two doors, we all know immediately. That is my idea. So tell me, my friends, Is it a good idea or is it not? It is good, O king, it is very good, the people answered. But they were quiet. They were afraid. Thank you, said the king. Now go home. Come to the stadium again at the same time next week. Then you can watch the first wrongdoer make his choice. Every week from now on, a different man is going to choose, to live, if he is lucky, or to die, if he is not. From that day, the people came every week to the stadium to watch a different wrongdoer. Sometimes, he opened the bright blue door and the beautiful lady came out. Then there was singing and dancing. Everyone threw flowers down to the lucky people and went home happily. But at other times, the wrongdoer opened the wrong door. Immediately, a big tiger ran out into the stadium and jumped on the unlucky man. In a few minutes, the tiger killed him in front of all the watching people. When he lay dead in the center of the stadium, the people went home sadly. They took their flowers with them. It is interesting that in a short time the number of wrongdoers in the country got much smaller. No one wanted to stand in the middle of the stadium and make that difficult choice. Now, there is another important person in this story. The king had only one child, a daughter. She was very beautiful. She had green eyes and long red hair and she moved as quickly as a cat. She too was strong and clever, as strong and clever as her father. She did not smile often. But when she smiled, people were happy. When she was angry, everyone was afraid. They knew that at those times she was a very dangerous young woman. Her picture was in every home. Men, women and children followed her when she went walking in the streets of the city. They waited to see her famous smile and sometimes they were lucky. One day, she was out walking in a city park when she saw a young man. He was a gardener and the park was where he worked. He was very good-looking. He was tall and strong. He had dark blue-black hair and a dark mustache. When he laughed, you could see his beautiful white teeth. The king's daughter stopped and looked at him closely. She thought that he was the most beautiful man in the world. She began to talk with him and heed him more and more. The young man could not understand. Why did the king's daughter want to talk to him? He was not important. He was only the king's gardener. But he could not take his eyes off her. As soon as he looked into her big green eyes and saw her smile, he was in love. But he knew that this love was very dangerous. He was not a rich man, not from a rich family. He could never marry the daughter of the king. Now, we know that the king's daughter was a strong young woman and that she was very clever. When her father's men took her lover away, she too saw the danger immediately. She knew very well what was going to happen next. So, early in the morning, she went to the stadium. No one saw her go. She spoke to the workers there and gave them some money. "Which room is the tiger in?" she asked. They told her. "And which girl is going to be behind the other door?" The workers did not want to answer. They were afraid. "I must know," said the king's daughter. "Who is she?" "She is the daughter of your father's driver," the workers answered. The king's daughter knew her well. a young and beautiful girl with rich brown hair. But the king's daughter did not like her. She began to think hard. If my lover chooses the wrong door, he dies. But if he chooses the right door, he marries this cheap little thing, this driver's child. And I lose him, to her. So I too must choose. That afternoon, the king called all his people back to the stadium again. His men brought the young man from the dark room. There he stood, in the middle of the stadium, tired, hungry and afraid. The king sat in his place above the people and his daughter sat next to him. She did not move. Her face showed nothing. Then the king stood and spoke to his people. You all know this gardener, my friends. And you know why he is here. He was the lover of my daughter. For many weeks, I did not know that, but I know it now. What happens to a wrongdoer in our country? That too we know. He must choose, the lady or the tiger. If he opens the wrong door, he must fight the tiger. If he opens the right door, he must marry the lady. So now choose, young man. Choose very carefully if you want to live and not die. The young man stood quietly and listened to the king's words. But his eyes were not on the king. They were on the face of the king's daughter. She had no smile for him today. But he looked at her eyes. Her eyes told him something. She looked down quickly at her hand. Then she looked up again. He saw her smallest finger move a little to the left. And immediately he knew, the door to open was the door on the left. He turned and walked very slowly to the left-hand door. All the people watched him, without a sound. He put out his hand and opened the door. But here the story ends. Remember that the king's daughter was a clever young woman. She was in love, but she was angry too. Did she want her lover to meet the tiger, a fight that he must lose? Did she want him to die? Or did she want him to live and have another beautiful woman for his wife? To give him this other woman, in place of her? We do not know what ideas were at work inside her beautiful head. Tell me, what do you think? Which did she choose? What was behind that door, the lady or the tiger? One day, a boy was walking near his village. He looked up, and saw a beautiful girl. She was looking after her father's goats. The boy fell in love with the girl at once. He wanted to marry her. You're the most beautiful girl in the world, said the boy. I want to marry you, the girl smiled at him. I like you, too, she said. But I can't marry you. My father will not agree. Then let's run away together, said the young man. I'll come with my friend tomorrow and take you to my home. They talked for a long time, and at last the girl agreed. The next night, the young man came back to the girl's village. His friend was with him. Come, my beautiful one, he called softly. Run away with me, the girl heard him. She ran out of her village and found the young man and his friend. They laughed and smiled at each other. They were happy. Let's go, said the young man. It's a long way to my village. They walked all night. In the morning they were hungry. The girl said, "Let's find something to put in our mouths." "How can we do that?" the young man said. "There's no food here." "You know that already." But his friend smiled at the girl. "She's not talking about food," he said. "She means, let's find some twigs to brush our teeth with." The girl smiled back at him. "You're right," she said. "I did mean that." They went on together. The sun was high in the sky now. It was midday, and they were all tired. "Let's rest," said the girl. They all sat down under the trees. The girl and the young man's friend took off their shoes, but the young man didn't take off his shoes. "Why don't you rest?" the girl said to him. "I am resting," the young man answered. "This boy is stupid," thought the girl. "How can he rest with his shoes on his feet?" The young man's friend was looking at her. "The young lady sees your shoes," he said to his friend. "Why are you still wearing them? If you want to rest, you must take them off." The girl looked at him. "Yes," she said. "You understand." Soon they went on, and came to a village. The people were kind. They invited them to eat. At the end of the meal, the girl said, "Some of the meat is still left. Let's get rid of it." "What do you mean?" said the young man. "Look at the plate. It's empty." "The meat is finished." His friend was watching the girl. He stood up and went to a bush. He broke off a thorn and gave it to her. "Some of the meat is stuck between our teeth," he said. "She wants us to get it out, really." "Oh dear, I didn't understand," said the young man. "You don't understand anything," said the girl. She was smiling at his friend. The evening came at last. The three travelers arrived at the house of the sheik. He was ready to marry the young man and the girl. "Are you ready to marry?" the sheik said to the girl. "Yes," she answered. "Do you want to marry this young man?" said the sheik. "Oh no," the girl said. "I want to marry his friend." So the girl and the young man's friend were married. The poor young man shook his head. "I made a mistake," he said. "I chose the wrong friend to come with me. If I take another bride from her father's house, I will choose my friend more carefully. I will make